Hi, this is Pratik Chogli. I'm recording here from San Francisco, and I want to make a video today on how in the law school admissions process you can really take advantage of the resources of your undergraduate institution. So the reason a lot of people sort of seek out and ultimately hire a law school admissions counselor, like a private one, is because they feel like they're not getting enough support and guidance from their colleges and their universities. And you know, that's certainly true. I mean, you're obviously not going to get the kind of undivided attention and training and so forth when you're working with a private consultant as you are with more general services. But I also think that there's a tendency among people who are applying to law school not to fully utilize the resources that are available at colleges, especially at good ones. And obviously the more you sort of get into the habit of really exploring and maximizing those resources that are available, I was going to say for free, but they're not for free. I mean, you're paying for them through your tuition. And the more of the legwork that you do on your own and so forth, the easier it's going to be for you to make use of a private consultant if you go down that route. And so I think there are specifically, I've noticed 5 resources that universities tend to have universally that tend to be underappreciated. So I think number one is the designated law school advisor. This is usually a dean or someone like that. And I remember, you know, looking back, a big reason why I think I was able to navigate the law school admissions process is because right at, even before I was a freshman in college, like during the admitted students weekend, I remember they had a session by the dean at the time who was in charge of law school admissions. And I remember, you know, it was, the purpose of it obviously was to try to convince admitted students who were debating between different colleges that, to try to show them that Brown was responsive to people who wanted to do that. But at the same time, the information was valuable, especially for someone who didn't know a whole lot about it. And over time, I just sort of kept in touch with him throughout my time at Brown and picked his brain and so forth. And one of the resources that, in particular, that these offices tend to have is that they tend to keep pretty good records of past people from your college or university who applied and how they fared. And that's information that can be very valuable and useful if you can look for it. So that's number one. Number two is the career services office, and these like career services offices are sort of notorious for not, like, everyone complains about them, you know, to some extent for a good reason. But what I do think they can be very valuable for is if you know, let's say like your top, I don't know, 3 to 5 or 3 to 10 top law schools that you want to attend, it's obviously a good idea to get to know people from your undergraduate school who got into these places and went there, especially if they're relatively recent grads or if they're people who went on to be prominent alums. And you can obviously reach out to these people cold, but if you have, if you get help from the career services people in identifying these people and also potentially in making an introduction, you're probably going to have much better luck in building a relationship with them by virtue of the fact that you have this common undergraduate connection and you have the career services people reaching out to them. You know, and these are relationships where you can sort of pick their brain and get insights on how they succeeded in the process, or you can potentially find a way to work with them or for them, which could lead to a good letter of recommendation. they can obviously open their network to you, so that's definitely a good resource. Number 3 is the Writing Center, and here there are, I think, a couple advantages. So one, the quality of your personal statement that you ultimately write on your application is it's going to be the culmination of how good of a writer and skilled of a writer you are generally, and that's not a skill that you develop overnight. And so, especially in classes where you have a paper or a writing assignment, if you can get into the habit of going to the Writing Center and really getting feedback and coaching from people there who are presumably there because they know something about writing, that's going to really build your skill set and improve your skill set. And you know, I mean, there's just ample studies that feedback is a really, really critical ingredient in just getting better at anything. If you want to read more about that, I recommend checking out the literature on deliberate practice, where they say that feedback is a key component of developing any skill. And you know, and then obviously when you get to the point where you have to write your personal statement, the way it's going to get better is just by getting a lot of different people to provide feedback and commentary and edits, and the Writing Center can be a good use and resource for that. Number 4 is tutors. There's usually a way, if you're in a course, to get tutoring from another undergrad there who has in the past gotten an A in the course, and these can be really good resources for a lot of the reasons that the Writing Center is. And you know, this is an opportunity too, especially if you can figure out a way to navigate the system, to get to know people who can not only provide you with immediate help and coaching in your classes, but you know, ideally you'll also find people this way who obviously are willing to help and maybe are themselves either on the pre-law process, or maybe they're kind of ahead of you in terms of navigating the process and applying. And this is a good way to start to build up a good Rolodex or a good network. And then finally, I would say fellowships, and the office that really cares about fellowships. Now, one of the things that happens is that universities may or may not provide a lot of help and guidance for advising on law school admissions, but they do typically tend to put in more into really doing whatever they can to help their undergraduates get prestigious fellowships. Things like the Rhodes and the Marshall and the Truman and the Gates fellowships, and they tend to put more in these because like the number of Rhodes Scholars from a certain college or Marshall Scholars just tends to be much more of a significant metric or like a branding exercise. And so one of the things you can do is, if you're on the fence about whether or not to apply for these prestigious fellowships, or even if you don't think that you'll be all that competitive, if you can apply for these, one of the sort of benefits or like the positive externalities of this is that the process is in many ways the same, and you'll get more attention and help on your fellowship applications, but in the meantime you'll also be able to use that help for your law school applications. So for example, like with the Rhodes Scholarship, they require, I think you have to get like 8 letters of recommendation for that. And you don't need that many, obviously, for law school, but if you go through the Rhodes process, even if you're not particularly keen on you know, spending a couple of years in England, or even if you don't think you're competitive, the process of getting 8 letters of recommendation is going to be very helpful, because you'll probably like get a sense of which of your recommenders from talking to them are going to write a better or worse letter of recommendation, or how they're going to comment on different aspects of your background and profile. And then you also have to write a personal statement, and you might get, you'll get different deans, different advisors, different people at the university who are giving you feedback on that, in addition to your law school advisor. And so going through this fellowship process, you're just going to get more support. So these are 5 avenues, and I recommend you explore all of them. Really go through the process. Try to be, even if these things aren't adequate or you wish that they were better, utilize them and maximize them and see what you can get out of them. And then once you go through that, and if you find you still need help or you still need an additional sort of source of support, I think that you can also use an admissions consultant as being one more supplement rather than just relying on this one resource.